Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, I'm going to be going over my Spellslinger Frostbolt Triggerbot madness I created in Crucible League. Now, I wanted to play with the Saboteur, with the new Triggerbots from the Ascendancy with Spellslinger Frostbolt, and this is what we ended up with. Just missing my Enlighten. So, this build was inspired by Phantasmal Frostbolt, which the alt quality gives projectiles a 20% chance to return to you, as well as anomalous faster projectiles, which is getting nerfed in 3 days from recording this video. It originally had quality giving up to 60% chance for projectiles to return to you. It's now getting dropped to 10. So I am going to remove this anomalous faster projectiles from this build for this guide and just put in a basic faster projectiles. I don't have a leveled faster projectiles, but this will do. It's going to lose a little bit of projectile speed, and there might actually be a better support gem here in the future, but this will more closely resemble what this build is capable of in the upcoming Trial of the Ancestors patch. So not all of them are going to be able to return to you, but there's still ways you can work around it, with the Diala's chest giving you increased quality off of Frostbolt, Ashes of the Stars giving you increased quality on the Frostbolt. You get a lot of chance for these projectiles to return to you without going for the Uber Drop Ring or the new support gem that causes projectiles to return to you, but big mana cost there. So this is a Spellslinger build. So Spellslinger causes a reservation, and if I attack with a wand, it will cast the spell linked to it with all of its supports, while also giving a big bonus of damage from the equipped wand. So having flat damage on the wand also goes to the Frostbolts here being triggered with Spellslinger. So all I'm doing is casting Frenzy, and I am triggering the Frostbolts. But since I'm a Saboteur, I have Triggerbots, and instead of it casting Frostbolts from me, it casts from both of the Triggerbots on every single time I use the Frenzy, assuming I have enough mana for them to cast. So the big issue with this build was I had to work out the mana cost so that I could cover the triggering of both of the sets of Frostbolts. So it winds up getting pretty costly with mana there, but you can work it out with clarity and a mana flask. The last thing I should mention here before I throw this into a map and show you what's going on is I have trigger socketed spells when using a skill with a 4-second cooldown on the wand. So here I'm triggering Vortex, Tornado, and Frostbomb. These also will trigger from the Triggerbots. So the vortexes will come out wherever the Triggerbots are as they kind of run around. I have the minion life bars on so you can kind of see it, and all of that triggers from there too, and spells trigger that way have 150% more cost, so that is further doubling down on the mana issues this build has. But then I stack enough chance to freeze, I can use Painseeker gloves, giving me a chance to inflict freezes as though dealing 200% more damage, and I'm using a Heat Shiver, giving me 100% of cold damage as extra fire against frozen enemies. Pretty insane. So let me show you what this is doing in the map. We got Monster Life, Tim Chain's Beyond. So as I push through here, we're going to just launch Frostbolts through enemies, and everything freezes and then goes up in flames because of the Heat Shiver. And this build just absolutely slaughters. It is ridiculous how much fun this is, with all of the bubbles going around your screen and like freezing everything. Probably one of the most fun builds I've ever played, and there came a toll. Come smack me out of nowhere. This is definitely not the tankiest build, but that's kind of what you deal with when you're playing with meme potential to this degree. In Path of Exile, only like 4k life at level 94, but I made the build do this nonsense, right? So why not? I'm freezing things with bubbles that I'm launching everywhere. It's fantastic. It's chaotic. It's a one-button build. Like, all I'm doing is casting Frenzy, and all of this nonsense is happening. Every right-click, we're just launching more bubbles. And it's so good. Here's the boss. Now, for single target, I also have an Ice Nova linked with Unleash. Now, Ice Nova will cast on location of Frost Bolts. And I'm even freezing these bosses here as well. But I can cast some Frost Bolts, or I can cast some Ice Novas, rather, on the Frost Bolts, like on a target. I can target the location, and I unleash it, so I get 4 casts of the Ice Nova, but the Ice Nova will also attach to 2 different Frost Bolts at the same time, so I'm getting like 8 Ice Nova casts off at once if I were to cast this here. It's kind of hard to see. I have a MTX on the Ice Nova just to try and be able to see it visually, but you also don't need it, really. I originally just had the Frostbolt in a 4-link, and I had the Ice Nova in the 6-link, so I could zap some single targets if needed, but once I got to the point that I was freezing bosses with this, I didn't really need it as much. And this build is just a blast. It is so much fun. And I'm about to go through it so you can see how it all comes together. So like I mentioned, I was originally using just a 4-link. I had the Frostbolt, I had Spellslinger, I had faster projectiles, and I had GMP. And then the 6th link was for the Ice Nova. Now, eventually, I got this into a 6-link, and to do that, I had to use Inspiration, which lowers the cost of skills, and then when I'm using this, can give me Inspiration charges for extra damage. And then I had to use an Enlighten as well, because it costs too much. I had to lower the reservation a little bit because there just wasn't enough mana left here with what I had in SSF to make everything super smooth. And even if I remove the Enlighten, you can't put another skill gem in here because it's just going to increase the reservation of the Spellslinger. I also should mention here that I am using an anomalous Spellslinger. This is another 20% chance to freeze, shock, and ignite on supported skills, so that is aiding in the freeze chance of the Frostbolt. So as I go through the passive tree, you'll see where I have all this freeze chance to make these Painseeker gloves work. So Painseeker means critical strikes do not inherently inflict non-damaging ailments. So I cannot chill, I cannot freeze. I have to get chance to freeze, and then these roll from up to 100 to 200% more damage of non-damaging ailments, as though they're dealing up to 200% more damage. And I got a max roll on that on these gloves, which is also really cool. On these gloves, I also have Trigger Commandment of Frost on kill. That gloves enchant when I kill enemies. That Commandment of Frost also triggers off of both of the Triggerbots, which is, it's ridiculous. Moving on. For my Ice Nova, I have this linked with Unleash. I have an Awakened Cold Pin here, and I have Hypothermia. Extra damage against chilled enemies. I think I originally had an added cold damage in there. Maybe even a conk effect for the Ice Nova when this was just in the 6th link, but now that is not there. In my gloves, I have Frostblink linked with Unbound Ailments, Bone Chill, and my Clarity is also here. So what this means is this chilling ground. If I were to Frostblink over an enemy, enemies in this chilling ground are guaranteed to be chilled, and then they're going to take increased cold damage from Bone Chill, and I'm increasing the effect of chill with Unbound Ailments on the Frostblink. My helmet, I have an Assassin's Mark linked with Mark on Hit. Now, while I can't I can't make an enemy frozen with critical strikes, I can still deal critical strikes, and I have crit multi. So getting Assassin's Mark gives me more crits, gives me power charge generation on single target. I also have a Hatred and a Herald of Ice. Those are the auras that I'm using in addition to the Clarity. And then I have my Anomalous Frenzy linked with a Cast on Death, portal. And in the wand is the Frost Bomb, Tornado, and Vortex that also, like all triggers, it's just so much nonsense, and I love every bit of playing on this build. So for gearing wise, the only things that were absolutely necessary here were these gloves and the helmet. Heat Shiver. So everything is pretty much just life resists. I get +1 all cold skill gems with a bunch of crit multi on my amulet. Rings also both have minus the mana cost of skills, because the mana cost, it's doubling from the Spellslinger, and I'm all these triggered gems here. I have to lower the cost of these skills. So it is really important to get the minus mana cost of skills to make this work. But otherwise, this is just life resists. Actually, this ring doesn't even have life on it, because I wasn't in Trade League. This is the last build I made in the league. So the important thing was that I had the slots for the minus mana cost. Belt has big life and a little bit of lightning res strength, but the important thing here is to craft cooldown recovery rate. And before I explain that, I will mention the wand. I'm using an imbued wand that dropped Fractured with increased attack speed on it. T1 attack speed. So this is the fastest attack speed wand base you can get without any synthesized nonsense on it. So the increased cooldown recovery rate pairs with attack speed. And you can see here in the very top right of the tooltip on my Frostbolt, it has a cooldown time of 0.33 seconds. Now with my Frenzy, my attack time is 0.51 seconds, and I can actually hit my Tornado here and generate up my Frenzy charges that I get just by using Frenzy. And then now this attack time is 0.34 seconds. And then I can trigger the Frostbolts every 0.33 seconds, assuming that I have the mana. So the idea is to get the attack time on your Frenzy as close to, but not below, the cooldown time on whatever you're triggering with Spellslinger. So because of this, now I can have all of my Frenzy charges up, and I can hold down right click, and I'm going to, every time I cast or attack with Frenzy, I will be launching all of the projectiles, no matter what, assuming I have the mana, right? If you run out of mana, it just won't, they won't cast. So cooldown recovery rate's absolutely important. You can get a Shaper influenced belt, and I believe get up to 20% increased cooldown recovery rate. The craft can only go up to 12 unless you use a Veiled Chaos Orb. And you can also get Shaper influenced boots, I believe, to get more cooldown recovery rate. But here I am dropping Brittle Ground while moving and getting increased cooldown recovery rate of travel skills. There's life and spell suppression here on these boots as well. So the idea, right, is that for a single target, since I'm freezing the enemy that I'm fighting, I Frostblink on top of it and then run over it, make them brittle, giving me increased crit chance there, and the Bone Chill to get the damage out there. My shield also has a bunch of spell suppression, and the Crucible tree here had a bunch of spell suppression on it as well. Chance to sap enemies when you block damage. Cannot block spell damage with some extra attack block, whatnot. The big thing here was the spell suppression, which I could easily get this on the tree or on other gear, as I almost wound up not needing the spell suppression that is here, as you'll see on the passive tree. And on my chest, a bunch of evasion, energy shield, mana recovery rate, extra defenses from physical damage, life, some resistances. Like nothing too crazy went into all this gear. It was just enough to like make the madness happen. Then my diamond flask here is really important because this is giving me a 34% chance to freeze, shock, and ignite during effect. That chance to freeze, as I mentioned, is very huge. I have Quicksilver flask for speed, reduced effective curses on the quartz flask so I can move through enemies. I need the mana flask to make sure the mana is topped up, and I have a life flask with corrupting blood removal. So now, digging into the passive tree. This is absolutely a Saboteur only build because of Perfect Crime, this gives you the trigger bots. It also has 35% less damage with triggered spells here from those trigger bots, but you're getting double the amount of spells triggered, so it winds up being more damage there, as well as like clockwork. Increased cooldown recovery rate, 30% increased cooldown recovery rate. So that allows you to trigger these more often, and you're not going to be able to get cooldown on a Spellslinger build on any other Ascendancy like you can on a Saboteur. And lastly here, I get damage penetrates 10% Res against chilled enemies, and I'm also burning those enemies, so I'm getting extra crit multi there because of my helmet. And then I have Born in the Shadows. I cannot be blinded, take reduced damage from blinded enemies. Nearby enemies are blinded, and I can blind enemies on hit, which is really nice, even though I'm not using a Grace or really stacking Evasion to make good effect of that blind. But if every enemy's frozen, they're not going to hit me anyways, right? So going through the passive tree, I pushed out through damage and elemental damage along the top of the shadow tree into trickery. This is crit chance. And then I have elemental focus. This is increased effective non-damaging ailments, which gives me better uptime on the freeze. So elemental focus is important here. I also grab assassination for the crit chance and multi. Soul Siphon gives extra mana recovery on kill. Blood Siphon, strength, life, into coordination, this attack speed here. Now, it is really important that if I increased my attack speed by too much more, I'd be attacking with all my frenzy charges faster than my cooldown. But given the insane cooldown you get on the Saboteur, like it's actually hard to get that attack speed low enough to optimize. Then I push down towards the Ranger start, grab Charisma. This is increased mana reservation efficiency of skills. Absolutely important to fit in the Spellslinger. Based on the support gems you link with it, it's going to change that reservation cost. And there's probably a Helm enchant dedicated for Spellslinger that can lower the cooldown rate or maybe give you better mana reservation efficiency there. Along with, you could get it in Light and level 4 and get better support gems linked there. But I grab Ballistics for projectile speed, projectile damage. Frostbolts are normally pretty slow, so without the faster projectiles in here, they move really slow. So it worked really nicely with this anomalous faster projectiles, allowing them to return to me. But faster projectiles really helps this map and clear a lot better, and that stacks with the projectile speed here. I grab Primal Spirit for extra mana and the strength and intelligence. Heart of Oak is life. Revenge of the Hunted is also life. Evasion, I'm getting chance to suppress spell damage if helmet, body armor, gloves, and boots all have evasion rating, which they do here. Pain Seeker and Heat Shiver both having evasion on them opens that up for the extra 15% spell suppression. And then I grabbed Inveterate. This is all spell suppression here, and I could have gotten chance to suppress spell damage is lucky on this mastery in place of the spell suppression I had on this Crucible tree. Then I grabbed an extra frenzy charge. I have the Watcher's Eye. Watcher's Eye is pretty big for this as well, as I get base critical strike chance while affected by hatred. So that is further pushing the crit ability of this. And then I grab Herbalism for more life, as well as the crit chance and multi in Heart Seeker. Pushing up the shadow side of the tree, grab more life. Blood Drinker, the flat life from the life mastery. Another Jewel Socket with life, crit multi for elemental skills, some resistances. Grabbed another Frenzy Charge, Power Charge. Grabbed another mana node here, Mind Drinker, so I'm recovering a percentage of mana on kill. And then I get increased mana reservation efficiency of skills from the Mana Mastery. The other mana nodes I grabbed didn't have a mastery tied to them, so this was the best place to grab that mastery. I grabbed Doomcast for crit chance and multi to spells. I went more for the crit chance. Written in Blood gives me life energy shield, more strength. I grab Influence. There's a little bit of mana reservation efficiency here, as well as increased effect of the auras from the clarity and the hatred, at least. Then pushed it down here. I grabbed Throat Seeker. This is all crit multi. I grabbed Arcane Expanse to give the spells increased area of effect. But the big reason I went in here for these spell nodes was to get the extra seal on Unleash, so that my Ice Nova could stack up to 4. And then giving me 8 casts of it because it can hit 2 Frostbolts. It actually reads like that on the gym. Yeah, it says it can expand from up to 2 Frostbolt projectiles. So that's how it just like gets this big ripple effect of the Ice Novas. So I had to get that caster mastery. Then I grabbed Snow Forged. Enemies ignited or chilled by you have -5 resistances with some cold damage there. Exposure you inflict applies at least -18 to the affected resistance. And then I have cold nodes. I have Glacial Cage. Enemies permanently take 1% increased damage for each second they've ever been chilled by you, up to a maximum of 10%, with increased effective chill on the right side. The left side has 30% chance to freeze, increased duration of freezes on enemies, increased damage if you shattered an enemy recently, and then a cold mastery. Enemies permanently take 5% increased damage for each second they've ever been frozen by you, up to a maximum of 50%. Also, extra damage scaling, and then pushing over for Heart of Ice. This is cold penetration on the right side, and the left side is increased duration of cold ailments, extra chance to freeze here as well. So here is 25% chance to freeze. Here is another 30 chance to freeze. And then I have 20 with the anomalous Spellslinger, and then the rest I get from the Diamond Flask chance to freeze. So that is how I make everything freeze while using Painseeker gloves. And then this mastery I have causes enemies near targets you shatter to have a 20% chance to be covered in frost for 5 seconds, which causes them to take 20% increased cold damage. Now, if you're curious about where the exposure is coming in to factor in the -18 here from this mastery, it is coming from the Frost Bomb. This applies -15 cold exposure, so I'm getting an extra 3 cold res off enemies from that. And I'm not using any cold curses. The only curse I'm using is Assassin's Mark for the extra crit, actually, because it seems like it's worked a little better, and I like to crit things. And Painseeker was one of the last things I worked in as well. I was actually trying to crit and freeze things at first before I worked all of this in. So I think that pretty much covers the build. I played on this for 4 or 5 videos maybe, so you can definitely do more with this in Trade League, but it is so much fun to play. I definitely recommend, though it is a little bit more advanced. I don't know, I'd recommend it right off the bat for a new player. You kind of have to have some understanding of how a lot of underlying things work to make this happen and get the reservation efficiency to line up. But as with all the other build guides, let's throw it on a boss. Let's do Eater of Worlds with the bubbles without the returning. So originally, right, all of these projectiles would get to their end of their duration and just return to me. So it got super crazy, right? But doing the ethical thing here, kind of showcasing what it would be like in the upcoming league. Now, I don't believe this boss can actually be frozen, so I actually have to play the game a little bit in here. And then I will use the Ice Novas whenever I can. So I can't just sit here and spam down skills quite as easily as you would for a normal map boss. But this is more of a really fun map clearer than it is a bossing build. But it still has enough damage to get it done. Like permanent chill uptime. I can try and factor in the brittle, get the crits off. Get the bone chill by using the frost blink on the enemy, and it's not bad for a pinnacle boss, in my opinion. I've done way less damage in this boss fight before. And another fun thing about being Saboteur is I'm lowering the cooldown recovery rate on this boss, so its ability to go into its inescapable doom phase is going to be 10% lower because I'm a Saboteur, and the new Saboteur nodes are just insane, and it is a lot of fun. You get less Maven memory games as well, and I do have the spell suppression capped up, so I can actually take damage from things in here that are not these little tentacle slaps. As long as I'm not getting rapid fire from anything, I can take a hit. But I'm also trying to stay moving. I want that frost blink and the brittle down if I can get it to give me that extra crit chance and get the best damage uptime I can get in here. It's also quite possible here that a 6-link Ice Nova with just like a 4-link Frostbolt would be better. If you can get the Ice Novas just doing better single target damage. And the fight just goes on and on. I don't think I have the Culling Strike against marked enemy that you can get with mark skills. What did I anoint here? Sovereignty. Mana Reservation Efficiency. I should have showcased that. But you can also anoint Marked for Death and get Culling Strike against marked enemies. Looks like one more Inescapable Doom. Sketch one. As his health gets lower, gotta go through more of these little nodes here. Uh-oh, 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 ah! Yikes. Didn't hurt too bad. Now, it probably, if I was playing on a class other than Saboteur, I might run into another Inescapable Doom phase here. But, there we go. Saboteur, nearby enemies have reduced cooldown recovery rates, so I probably would have had to go through another phase of that there. But, there we go. That is the Spellslinger Frostbolt Triggerbot Saboteur build guide. So much fun. I know some of you guys are going to be messing around with this one in the upcoming league. But that's going to do it for me in this one. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the like button, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe, make sure you don't miss more videos from me. If you'd like to help support my channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon just below the video, or by joining to become a member. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.